All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and I will be taking you through a data analysis plan today. And what we will be doing in this class is to tell you exactly how to approach your data analysis should you have secondary data you want to work on your research. So to start with is you get a secondary data from a secondary source like Status Canada, and you have the raw data itself coming to you. But the first thing you need to do is understand your research question. So what is my research question here? My RQs. And talking about your research questions, there are three things you need to understand there. So what is the outcome of interest itself? What is my main predictors or exposures? You can call them predictors as well. These are your predictors variable. And what are the other variables I need to consider in this analysis? So we call them covariates. And your covariates in this case can either be a confounder or a modifier. Now, when you're certain about the research question, then you go further to actually inspecting the data. You do what we call data inspection. Now, when you do a data inspection, you need to understand that you're going through the raw data you've received from the secondary source. So you check in for either missing variables. You also check in for ways to recode your variables. So if you have some variables like gender is equals to male or female, you need to understand the best way to recode it. So if you want to code males as 1, females as 0, you need to understand how it's coded. Talking about missing variable, which is very important, you need to identify if these variables are indeed missing at random or not missing at random. And you need to have ways to deal with your missing variables. So the best way to do this is if it's missing at random, then it's cool. Then you can actually go further and you can use different techniques like you carrying over the last observation, or you actually doing multiple imputations to fill up your missing variables. But you need to understand first if it's missing at random or not missing at random. When you're done with your data inspection, then you start with what we call some descriptive statistics to go through. So your descriptive statistics in this case might be either a quantitative data in terms of number, in terms of how tall, what is the average height of the population, or what is the average age of the population. So you will be representing things using mean plus or minus standard deviation. You would also be using a median and interquartile range if your data is not distributed normally. And there are different tests for that, and we'll cover that in the next class. But if your data is categorical, like gender, males or female, proportion, then you represent it based on number and percentage. So there are 40 males in your data set, and the proportion of males in the data set is, say, 20%, for example. When you're done with your descriptive statistics, then you go to what we call a bivariate analysis. Now, what your bivariate analysis does here is you're trying to compare two things together. So I'm trying to compare, for example, a certain variable. If I'm comparing the age distribution with the height distribution, I will be comparing two continuous variables, which I would be using tools like correlation. If I'm comparing a continuous variable with a categorical variable, I would be using things like t-test. And if it's more than two groups, I will use ANOVA, and we will also cover this in the next class. If your variables are both categorical, then you can do chi-square test to check the association together. When you're done with this, then you go to what we call the multivariate analysis. With your multivariate analysis, you determine the appropriate kind of analysis to do. If your outcome is a continuous variable, you probably want to do a linear regression. If your outcome is a categorical variable, you might be leaning towards a logistic regression. If your outcome is an ordinal variable in terms of agreement which has a certain order, you can use ordinal regression. Now, this is just a summary of a quick data analysis plan to go through if you're given a secondary data and you want to approach your analysis, maybe for your thesis. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next class to expand on these steps I've highlighted here. Thank you.